All right, we are definitely back. We are the two biggest windsurfing fans, and we were so stoked with what has just happened. If you don't know what's just happened, Cape Verde is back on the PWA calendar, kicking off 2022. We've just watched a single elimination over 2 days. We've got the video playing in the background. Obviously, I'm with Maciek Rakowski. Morning, mate.
How you doing? I was psyching, so much. I actually skipped a day of training to watch the event. So yeah,
well, I've got to say,
sitting in front of the computer. And
there's a little bit of a delay between me and Maciek, so I might end up talking over each other. So I'll apologise now. I wasn't going to do any lives from here in Cape Town because the internet is pretty terrible. I booked an apartment with amazing internet, hasn't got amazing internet, but we're going to try and do our best. And we just thought, like I said, we are, I would say, probably two of the biggest windsurfing fans out there. And I have spent 2 days sat on the sofa with a bit of COVID, to be fair, a bit of a loose term COVID now, but I've had COVID again. But I've used my time wisely and watched the 2 days of the action, and it went off. I have to say, I was crazy impressed. Like, I looked at the forecast before the event and I was thinking, oh man, it's going to be a bit of a letdown. But there was so many things going on. If you did watch the action, you will know what I'm talking about. Rocks, Maciek. I mean, it's obviously, and I will say this, it is always easier watching it on the stream, I know from commentating, than being out there and doing it. But just look at some of these scenes and you see the rocks poking up as the guys are going down the line. Crazy.
Yeah, last time I sailed Ponta Preta, my gear went on the rocks and I just swam in all the way to the beach because I wanted to avoid them. They're not nice, but I have to say, like, especially on this side, it's just, it's tiny, it's breaking right on the rocks, so you can't avoid it. But I thought, like, we're gonna do like winners and losers later, and I thought, fuck you, rocks, losers, because everybody negotiated it so well, and I don't think anybody actually broke anything on the rocks. Maybe Ricardo lost a fin. But like people doing airs all over the rocks. Just like Josh Angulo just getting out like as if, just like running on top of them. And yeah, I was quite impressed with everybody because those rocks are scary, and on the stream it didn't look like anybody was scared at all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. If it looks close on the stream, it's probably even worse. There was definitely a wave, which we're going to see in a minute, from Morgan Nareau, and he is just aerialing down the line, aerialing over rocks. It looks just insane. Like I said, we have got Graham Ezzy. He is turning up. He's running a little bit late at the moment. So we've basically, for people who don't know, obviously I'm used to commentating on the PWA World Tour, competed on the Wave World Tour. Maciek is like a super fan and obviously competes on the Slalom Tour. And then we've got Graham Ezzy, who's obviously a windsurfing fan, coach, and he's also competing in the competition. So he's going to give us like a little bit of lowdown from what it was like there as a competitor. Because like I said, watching on the stream, I know for sure it's definitely not the same as actually being there. So yeah, hang on. Graham Ezzy it looks like he's just coming in. If you want to leave a comment, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, if you put your comment up like this bloke, we can just click it. There we go. Thomas saying Adam broke a mass. We did see that, actually. Adam Varchol, the Polish ripper. Although, listening to when he was on the live stream, it sounded like he hasn't been sailing for 8 months or something crazy. He's been in Poland. Is that, Maciek, do you know much more about that?
Yeah. I think maybe the last time he sailed was we had like a little session in my home spot, like in August or July. I don't know. I haven't really been in touch so much with him. Normally he lives in Tarifa, but I think he moved back to Poland, and now I saw he was in Lanzarote surfing. But yeah, he said he didn't wave sail for quite a few months. Yeah. So that's a shame, but he rips. He's a surfer. He's he's like so I expect good things from him. in the double.
I just seen that video come over of the prawn, and I got to mention Kai's commentary. I'm going to mention it now because a lot of people have been asking me why I'm not there and why is Kai commentating. Basically, I was already booked up in Cape Town, all ready to go, and then the event was obviously announced last minute. Kai was already in Cape Verde, so Kai's doing the commentary, and I've seen it get a few negative comments. I can just honestly say, from my point of view, I watched 2 days and I was thoroughly entertained. You've got to remember 45-minute heats on your own to keep that level of stoke is just monumental. That is so impressive. There is nothing worse for me than a commentator who's got no energy, who's got no life. It would be an absolute disaster to have that. Yes, I would have liked to hear a few more about the scores and the individual scores and coming into the last minutes of who needs what to take it. But apart from that, for me, I thought he did an excellent job. And it was, like I said, I had 2 days of just pure entertainment, like literally parked on the couch for 2 days and quite happy to be parked on the couch. So just to answer Julian's question, we're not taking over for the rest of the event. This is literally just me, Matt Check. Ezzy's going to join us soon. Just, you know, shit talking, what you guys have probably been doing at home with your mates, but we wanted to put it on a bigger scale and kind of involve the community and just hear what you guys are thinking out there, because we're going to talk about priority on the wave, which is big guys versus small guys. We're going to talk about the rocks, talk about the equipment used, and lots more, basically. So if you've got any questions regarding that for me, Matt Check, or Graham, who's going to be joining soon, just let us know in the comments. We'll put them up and we will do our best to answer them.
Progressions, standouts, yeah, all sorts of things. But yeah, that hot, let's say, hot topic. I don't really have a hot take. There was many of them out there, like you say, you know, a lot of people criticizing, and I felt like a lot of the criticism came from like British people. I think it's a little bit of a British versus American English type thing, you know, where Kai's obviously on the pretty far on the American side, but as you say, the energy was, you know, through the roof. I thought like, the wipeouts from Joe, that's classic. I thought like, you know, when you're commentating in Maui, it's very natural. It comes off natural to hype up the Maui guys. Whereas when you're commentating in Ponta Preta, it's the same tack, it's similar type of wave riding, etc. But it's, you know, sometimes like somebody's ripping and you almost want a little bit more credit, even though maybe he's not he's not so established in, you know, in these type of conditions. This is maybe my only thing that I felt a little bit for the guys, you know, and this is a lot of the messages I got as well. But overall, like great energy. I thought, you know, like if anyone thinks you can do it better, just record yourself commentating on a heat, and you'll be like, yeah, fuck, that's really flat. That's like really that's what I feel like when I listen to myself doing any type of podcast or sometimes commentating or whatever. I'm like, come on, get the emotion out there, you know.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, sorry, Matt, you've commentated before. Just to keep that energy, like, I don't think anyone has any idea on your own, and I know it. Sometimes you start talking and you end up talking about something that you're like, what the hell am I talking about? Because you almost go into this crazy unknown world of just talking. It's quite a mad place. Like, what I would love to see in the double is some of the riders who get knocked out. I know they're not happy, they're probably not in the right space and they're trying to help everyone else, but even if just people came in for 20 minutes, I think that would help Kai massively. But I genuinely think he did a frigging good job, and like I said, I watched it. I was thoroughly entertained, especially with the samurai. Anyway, I've just seen Graham as he's turned up. I'm going to add him in. We've got so many comments. I'm struggling to keep up already. Here he is. Hey, mate. How are we doing, Graham?
Hi. Hello from Cabo Verde. How's everyone doing?
We want to ask you
Yeah, man,
questions,
good,
so don't
all
ask
good.
us anything.
Come on, bring it on, bring it on.
How was it?
Okay,
How was it?
like I said, I'm in charge
initial...
of comments. So if you are commenting on YouTube or Facebook and you don't see your comment, you can go again. But I've got a list already of just crazy amounts. If I go quiet and I look like I'm reading, I am. So I might just leave these two to talk for a bit while I just go through and pick out a few comments. So I'm sure a lot of you got questions for Graham as well, because he was on the water. So I'm sure I've read a lot of questions about kit choice, board size, sail size, what were people on? I think a lot of people want to know that, Graham. So maybe you can just start off just explaining how the competition went for you, and maybe just like a rider's look from being there.
Yeah, sure. So in general, the conditions were good, epic compared to any other PWA event we've had in the recent past, but also really challenging. When the wave is smaller like this, it breaks on the rocks. You can see in the videos that are playing right now that rocks are coming up through the ride. It's quite amazing. There was a wave of Morgan, if you can go back, Ben, or maybe it's coming up after this, it's somewhere in here, where there are rocks left and right in the face of the wave as he's riding it. And this is a bigger one that we see Josh on now. And so there are fewer rocks, but even at this size, you know, Josh has to come in on the rocks with this wave. And it makes it quite difficult. Also, it's a faster wave when it's so small like this, which also makes it more difficult, makes it more of a racetrack rather than a canvas for doing turns. To answer the second part, well, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, this was one of the best waves of the competition in terms of the setup, I think, for the wave. So maybe doesn't totally talk about exactly what you're talking about at the moment, but just so people know.
And so how did it go for me? I felt like our heats had a bit of bad luck with the timing. So, for example, my first heat was scheduled at dead high tide. And so Duncan had announced before that it was possible that they would end the heat or pause the whole competition at high tide, but he wanted to keep running just in case it stayed good. And so our heat was dead high tide. And sure enough, in that first heat, the waves disappeared, the wind turned more offshore, it got lighter. All of these things happened with high tide here. And so he canceled that heat in the first round. And then we were the next heat to go again. And so when the conditions started to look like they were coming back on, that's when we ran again. So again, it still wasn't fully firing like it was in the evening of that first day. But still, that first heat we had some waves. And
what crew were you on?
I'm on in that heat I was on a 95 liter board and a 5.0. See, look at all the rocks in the video. I mean, you can see it's
that's
just
the wave, isn't it?
The whole thing.
Yeah, he's just airing over rocks. Yeah.
I mean, this just shows how close we're riding to the rocks. I mean, like those are rocks. Those are rocks. Those white parts in the wave. That's a rock. Right where he lands, that's a rock.
Hang on. There's a comment here. Are those rocks scary?
They're not as scary as other rocks. They're not as scary as the rocks, for example, in the north in Alibaba. They're not as scary as the Hokipa rocks, but they're not fun to go on. It's more difficult than coming up onto the beach at Pozo on the rocks. There are sections there that are easier or more difficult to handle here, where the rocks are maybe sharper. But in general, you can get by without getting cut up too much. You can see that Antoine Martin was standing on the rocks a lot. And there are sea urchins all over. So Brazinho, for example, he told me the bottom of his feet are covered in urchins. But in general, it's not that bad for the body. It can be bad for the gear. So we're kind of jumping all over the place. But anyway, so to answer a few of these different questions, in my first heat, one of my first waves, or I'm not sure which wave it was. I did kind of big air and I landed and I was like in the rocks, knocked my fin back, and I thought I just knocked the fin out. I came in, changed gear. But what I didn't see until the next morning was that actually I'd broken the fin box. And so the fin had knocked back and had smashed the bottom out of the slot box. And so that was why then I was on not the same gear in the second heat. I was on my smaller board. So to answer the question, someone asked if I was on too small a gear in that second heat, I would say yes. And I didn't have my 95-liter board because the fin box was broken. And I could have taken it for the one heat, but then it would have sucked water. It would have gained 10 pounds. It would have destroyed the board, not just for the rest of my life, but for the whole event. And it's a board that I want to have for the event. And there's going to be more heats. So I went out on my medium-sized board, but with a bigger sail, with a 5.5, which is the combination that you do not want in these conditions. With the offshore winds, you want to have, in general, a bigger board and a smaller sail, because you do need quite a bit of float to get going. So a bit of gear size to catch the waves, to get in position. But then once you're on the wave, there's so much wind coming up the face from the offshore wind that it really benefits to have a smaller sail. So it's better to have bigger board, smaller sail in these kind of conditions, so you can catch the waves with the bigger board. And especially with my gear, with that 95-liter board, it turns really well. So I don't feel at a disadvantage with how it turns. So I was quite disappointed with how that worked out, but that's also just the nature of our sport. You know, it's so gear related, and it's not like there are the budgets to have duplicates of everything. So how the dice roll.
Interesting point you make there about having a bigger board, smaller sail, and that's what probably a lot of people maybe don't appreciate. There'll be some guys out there that do, but on the wave, the apparent wind is crazy, isn't it? You're getting it's offshore, you're getting pushed in by the wave, you're going faster. So, you know, it looks like everyone's just tootling around outside with no power. And someone who's not used to seeing float and ride windsurfing are like, oh, this is a bit rubbish. They're just floating around. They've got no wind. But actually, any more wind than that, it becomes even harder to ride somehow, doesn't it? Would that be a fair point?
Yeah, it becomes more difficult to ride, and it becomes more tricky with the gear. When it's light like this, it's not that hard to choose the gear. You want a big board, like I said, and you want, you know, a sail that's just big enough to get you around and get you on the waves. But then once the wind comes up a bit, then it's quite difficult, because you want to go smaller, but if you go too small, then you can't position with the other riders, and it becomes a bit of an arms race, because we don't have a priority system in windsurfing like they do in surfing, where you trade priorities. And so every wave is a battle, and that means that there's an arms race with choosing gear that will get you in position.
So let's maybe talk about that first, because I know that's quite a big thing, priority. I've heard Brasinho's been bringing it up quite a lot. We've seen it in Maui before. So, you know, and I don't think it's any surprise if you look who's in the final here, which we're going to come on to, but they're all pretty light sailors apart from Brasinho, you know, almost featherweight sailors. I would say less than 70 kilos. Maybe Antoine Martin's a bit bigger than that. But they're pretty low 70s, high 60 kilos. Well, Tomo is probably lighter than that. But in Maui as well, the lower classic, the lighter wind. So I would say the guys out there maybe don't kind of see this, but my guess would be those guys are putting themselves in the position of catching waves and getting the best waves because they're lighter and more mobile. Plus, they've also got smaller gear, which when it's smaller, in my experience anyway, I tend to go with a smaller board because I like it to fit better in the wave. And if the board's quite big, got a lot of volume, you've got to have probably a custom or something if you're in this sort of conditions to have a big board that turns, you know, as you'd want it to. I don't know. I've always found a smaller board, I can get in the wave and fit in it better. Does that make any sense? Because it kind of contradicts what you're saying, but the problem is in a competition, you need a bigger board and a bigger sail to actually get yourself on the right wave in the first place. but then you're on the right wave and you've got this big load of gear and you're like, oh shit. So you're on all the best waves. I don't know. It was interesting. I saw Boujmar. He looked like his board was pretty big. You know, it didn't look, it looked like he wanted a smaller board, but he'd gone bigger to put himself in the best position to get the waves. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, possibly. And I think it depends a lot on the board itself. You know, just as not all 5.0s are the same, not all 90 liter boards are the same. There are better boards for wave riding than others at the same volume level. And maybe the boards, most of the production boards in general, are not made for down the line conditions like this. You know, they've got straighter rockers, and the bigger sizes even more so. I know with most brands, the bigger boards, the bigger wave boards, the rockers are straightening out as the boards go up. So like a 95 liter will have a straighter rocker than the 80 liter in a brand's lineup. And I think that's true across most brands. But like, for example, in my boards, between my 82 and my 95, they've got the same rocker because that's the rocker that I need to turn in waves like this. And
how heavy are you?
Just
put it out there.
I'm probably around, I fluctuate, but I'm probably around 90 kilos.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit.
So your big board is a 95, is that right?
Yeah. So I'm between, I fluctuate between like 89, 90, 88, somewhere there.
So you ride like a plus. So you ride like a +5, let's say. What do you think? Like Bernd, I know he rides a 74, 75. Because his sponsor obviously, you know, puts all the dimensions and stuff on the online. So what do you think most guys are riding? Like around that, like +5 to their weight, or in terms of volume, or?
I think it depends. I think the lighter you are, the larger you can go with your board in a way compared to your weight. So for example, if you look at the heavier guys, so me, Brauzinho, Josh, you know, I think Brauzinho is a similar weight to me. He might weigh a little bit more than I do. Josh weighs close, must be around 100 kilos, so quite a bit more. And there's, you know, all our boards are in a similar area, you know, around, I think Brauzinho has one board that's over 100 liters. But otherwise he's riding, you know, 96, 97. Josh is on, I think, a 95. Yeah, well,
actually, I got to interrupt now because there is a story I've got from Josh, which I think is just a brilliant story. I don't know if he wants people to know this, but I don't care. I'm going to say it anyway. So he was ringing around before the event to try and get hold of, it must be a 5-year-old production board, Angulo production board, single fin. And he rang a friend of mine in Portugal, said, have you still got that board? Because he knows this guy doesn't jump very much because he's from Portugal. And he's like, no, I sold it to someone in the Azores. He rang this guy. He got it organized to get from the Azores to Portugal. And he flew apparently to Portugal, picked it up, and that's what he's been using in the competition. And if you look at some of his waves, I have to say, it looks like it's performing pretty good. And that's what, a 95 single fin production. Quite interesting, I thought.
Wow.
And how heavy is Josh? Josh is, I mean, it's quite small for him.
I think he's about 100 kilos. I asked Noah, his son, and he said 100 kilos. So.
Oh, there we go. Noah's just messaged here. Josh rides 89 leaderboards. Oh, okay. Maybe it was an 89 then. I thought it was a.
That's an even more interesting data point. You know, where you see a lot of the smaller guys are going over their weight in terms of liters, and once you get bigger, you're closer or even below your weight. So you know, if Josh is on an 89 liter, which Noah, if you're commenting, is that it's a production board, right?
If it's not, it's going to ruin my story.
Is it a because I know sometimes in the production process, you know, the labels on the boards don't necessarily match what they are. You know, some boards, even if they're sold as an 85 or maybe an 88, I wonder what's the case with that board from Josh. If it has a bit more leaderage than it might seem to have.
Hey, I got one more question for Noah. How much weight did Dad lose doing all these rock runs? Because he just like went to the rocks, didn't even try to water start out of them, just go straight back. Like his gear would get picked up by some locals, and then just run straight to the beach. And I don't know, I've seen him at least like 7-8 times do that. So I actually messaged him, hey Josh, you're getting some cardio in, huh? Over there.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. Go on.
There's a question from Dave about whether we're restricted to pre-registered equipment. We are not. That's the case in slalom and also in freestyle to an extent, though less so than in slalom. But in waves, it is completely unrestricted.
Okay. I mean, there's so many questions.
Yeah. So can you? So Graham, do you think? Okay, Josh aside, because that's an Angulo and he's an Angulo, so that's like the exception, let's say. But do you think you can get away with a production board to like be competitive, go in the final, etc.?
I think it really depends probably on the brand and on the model of board. I don't want to say no to that. You know, like my 88 liter de curve turns really well. I'm on customs here, but my production de curve works in conditions like this. But if you see some of the other riders that are on production boards that are more straight rockered boards, you can see that they just don't work.
You can see it, huh? Yeah, you can see it, like catching rail, not turning, yeah.
So I mean, I don't even have to ask. Like if I watch the heats, if I watch the video, I know, okay, that person's on a production board and it doesn't seem to work in these waves.
But I guess this is quite an extreme wave. You know, it's kind of a certain, there's not many waves, I would have said, that people ride in the normal world like this.
No, and I don't think it's a bad thing that the production boards don't work. And in fact, it would probably be a bad thing if the production boards did work, because most people are not sailing in these conditions and you need really different rockers and outlines to ride these waves. You know, one of the things that sounds like a contradiction at first is that the straighter the rocker, the faster the board is in a straight line, which is what you want for you know, a lot of these onshore spots around Europe or even sideshore spots. But then if you take that straight rocker board and you put it on a wave with shape, it will actually go a lot slower than a board with more rocker, because it doesn't fit into the wave and you can't turn it. You know, those boards, they look like they just stop on the bottom turn. And that's what it feels like as well when you try to bottom turn a board that has.
But I've got to say as well, it depends how vertical you're riding and where you position yourself, you know, let's say in the wave, because most normal guys that are buying production boards, I use production boards. I haven't got one custom board. It just means in a very steep wave, somewhere like Hukipa or Punta Preta, I'm guessing, you just can't do those real vertical turns because the shape of the board is too flat compared to the wave, if that makes sense. But if you take a more shallow line, like probably most normal wave riders would, they're not going to be doing Brasilio style Bernd Rodiger, you know, vertical smacks in that sort of place of the wave. You know, on a whole, I would say 95% of the sailors won't do that. And you can sail it like, you know, the Jaws boards have got like free wave rockers and stuff like this. So, you know, the bigger the wave, well, depending on the shape of the wave is the important thing, isn't it? I mean, the shape of the wave is important, and where you are riding it.
I'm not sure if Jaws boards now are so straight. I mean, like my Jaws boards, I mean, I just use I've got big Hukipa boards, and those are what I use, and the rock they have, that's like what I'm on here. But yeah, I think that any kind of turn that you're doing on a steep wave like that, you're going to suffer from having too straight of a rocker. But if you're just racing down the line, obviously then, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Which I think is a perfect segue into judging criteria. What was
Okay.
like paint us a picture. First skippers meeting, and because there's a lot of talk about, you know, length of ride versus progression, risk versus, you know, length, you know, connecting the wave, etc. So first skippers meeting, head judge Duncan Coombs, he gathers you up and he tells you basically what's going to score well. So what does he say?
So one thing that he really stressed was that he wanted to see a vertical approach on the wave. And I think that that's quite understandable. It's a lot easier to race down the line and jump off the lip multiple times than to approach the wave vertically. It's so much harder to do. I mean, like, that's a good example, you know, and Morgan's a great rider, but, you know, he just did a great air, tried to go and do a vertical turn and just couldn't, right? And then he does another great air. And so it just shows how difficult it is to carve a bottom turn, come up and do a turn or an off the lip from that position. It's just so much harder, so much more difficult. And it involves a lot more timing, a lot more positioning, a much better technique in terms of using the rail of the board, being able to bottom turn. So Duncan is looking for a vertical approach. That was one of the main things he said. And then combination of major maneuvers. You know, so when the conditions were a little bit smaller than this, what he was saying is, you know, if you get a really good turn and an air on the wave, that's a good scoring wave. You know, that's a solid wave. And so if the guys that are just going down and just jumping down the line, that's not going to be such a high score. And likewise, the meat of the wave is that first section. There's like two, depending on the size of the wave, like 1 to 3 sections up at the top. And that's where the meat is. And so that's where most of the score is. So for example, Brasinho did a very amazing sit goiter in the shore break. But you know, the point that Duncan made, the head judge, is that he doesn't want this to turn into who can do the best trick in the shore break competition. You know, it's about those first big sections that are they're heavy, they have a lot of consequence, they're right on the rocks. And so if you do your trick on that first section, that will be rewarded, and especially if it connects with the rest of the ride.
So I'm just going to say, because I think a few people were asking me this question as well. Brasinho had the tweaked air and a goiter down on the beach break, which, to be fair, let's not take it away, is super hard to do that. But the problem with that wave, from what I can understand, and it's kind of like you can maybe liken it to pipeline, they don't get many points for doing an air reverse or something at the end of pipeline. What they want to see is you do a tube ride. And I think it's kind of plays like this with Punta Preta. They want to see you boosting off this section of the wave we're watching now. This is where all the consequences. If you mess this wave up there, you might not get another good wave. Whereas if you do it at the end of the wave, you're not really risking anything. You are, but you do just see what I'm saying. Like, if you'd have done,
I think not really. I mean, not really risking anything. I mean, that section at the end, it's breaking on sand. It can be powerful. The short break can be powerful, but you know, these opening sections. So if you do a tweaked air and a goiter on these opening sections, I think just those two moves on that heavy 10. First part, that would be a 10.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. So it depends really where you do the move. Also, the wave kind of gets smaller as it goes down. So the sections where Brazi was doing the tweaked air and the goiter were a lot smaller than up at the top. And wave size matters. You know, it's an important part of the judging criteria.
I think the problem.
He's still got a 6. I think he's still got a 6 something for the wave.
Which I think is a high score.
What's the general feeling on the beach from the sailors, judging wise? You know, you never know. Like, it felt pretty good watching. There was a few ones I thought, well, that could have gone either way. For me, the Josh one was quite interesting watching, because I was like, you know, there was part of me that's going, I don't want him to get through because it would mean we haven't moved on in 12 years. But there was another part of me that going, Jesus Christ, he absolutely ripped the wave. Like, he picked the best wave. He nailed all the sections. It just sat up. And I was kind of thinking I could have given that wave more than a 7.5, the one where he got the 7.5 on.
Josh is such a legend of the sport. He's someone from my personal experience who's influenced me so much. If I look at the riders that have influenced my style and how I approach windsurfing, you know, Josh is right up there with Polikow and Levi. You know, I think Josh, Polikow, Levi are huge influences for me, and I'm sure a lot of the other riders. And Josh is really one of the masters of our sport, and so I don't think it's strange that he can come in and still dominate, especially in a location where he's the king of it.
Yeah. But let me ask you this though. Like, I'm pretty sure a lot of people watching would like to see a little bit of a best move contest. Would like to see guys go for back loops of the lips. Would like to see, you know, Ertakas on that first section. But in that highlight reel that we're playing over and over, there's a goiter from Bernd on that heavy section you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And because the landing was not perfect, he missed the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So there's almost like there's way too much risk versus reward for competitors to go for those big moves, right? I mean, a one-handed air is a big move. A one-footed air Antoine did is a big move too, but it's not as like you have to land those goiters absolutely perfect, you know, to be able to continue on the wave. Do you think that we are a little bit on the classic non-progression side here? Like, should we reward progression a little bit more just because for outsiders and for people watching at home and whatever? I think they you know, it's really hard. It's splitting hairs between, you know, connecting the wave a little bit better or worse.
Okay, let me flip this around on you. In the last 10 years, this is like my judo answer. In the last 10 years, we've seen so much progression in terms of tricks in windsurfing on the wave, and that's both in places like Pozo and Tenerife. You know, you watch Julian Salmon on Instagram, the stuff he's doing is insane, the tricks there, and that gets heavily rewarded. We see that in the competition. You look at Hokipa, there's so much progression in the tricks. Like, just to give a point of reference, when I was here for the competition in 2009, you know, at that time I was doing these carving takas, and I was kind of the only person doing those. And I remember talking about doing one on this wave when I was talking about it with Levi and Polikow, and they were like, "It's impossible. You can't do it here. The wave's too fast." And I did one, which I won the expression session with. And that sort of, you know, was the beginning of an era of really wave trick development. And so from 2009 till now, we've really seen that progress where carving takas are a common move that you see now down the line in places like Hokipa, where that was really rare before. Goiters now, which used to be something that people threw but didn't land, you know, you've got a lot of guys who are landing goiters almost 100%. You see a lot of these combo waves. And so in the last 13 years, we've seen so much progress with wave maneuvers. But what we haven't seen, and because we haven't had the competitions that reward it, we haven't had the media focused on it, we haven't seen progression in terms of carving, flow. Like one of the things that I get so frustrated with when I watch windsurfing media or windsurfing events is there seems to be so little knowledge or understanding about wave flow or about carving turns or about, you know, really what constitutes good fundamental surfing on a wave. And so to sort of flip your question around, I would say that what is progressive right now and what we need to progress in the sport is a focus on fundamental wave riding. And that's where there is going to be the most needed progress.
Well, I'll say, I think the guy who was the most flowy, if that's the right word, who had the best flow won the competition. Like me, watching, just oozed flow. You know, it literally, you watched it, and for me, it just, if it had been Cowley, if he had a Cowley Ciardi's kit and the hairdo back from the day, you would have gone, it looks like Cowley. Like, it had that same kind of just using the wave and not really thinking of a set plan, which I saw from a few guys going down the wave. It was like, okay, but he just kind of went with what he was dealt with. I thought it looked really impressive. I'd have been almost disappointed if he hadn't won, because I just generally thought throughout the competition, I thought, man, he's just got it all. I thought Antoine Martin was a standout for me as well. He just kept getting set wave after set wave, going massive, and he was trying a bit as well, which I quite liked. I thought Brazinho as well looked, he didn't quite get the waves like I thought, but he just, whatever he got, he kind of made it into something, which I think that's why he was in the final. I don't think he managed to get all the waves, and that could be down to size and positioning, which we've talked about with priorities and stuff. And I mean, there's so many questions from this event, but the one thing is, for me, it was just super exciting to see an event down the line and see some new characters pushing through, see some upsets, because we've got to talk about it. Victor Fernandez out in the first round. When you watch the heat back, I think that could have gone either way. There's a few waves from him, which I think maybe were underscored, but I'll have to say it, he didn't pick the set waves. It was Victor's style, positioning looked really good, but he just wasn't on the correct waves. And then you had Liam Dunkerbeck, who maybe didn't have the same style and flow as Victor, but he was on the set waves. And as a judge, it's really difficult to not reward. I mean, actually, I'm going to put that video on because I picked out a few clips from the live stream, but it was blimmin' interesting, I have to say.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, like, in a way, but then we have that wave size factor too, which, as Ben says, like, Liam picked like the better waves. Victor was ripping though, those small, like, nice turns, nice flow, basically what Graham was talking about, which I love your answer. I absolutely agree. But at the same time, like, you almost have to run down the line here and do like those stock airs just to even make the wave, right? There's hardly a section to do a big carve.
If you don't have the technique, definitely, it's a lot easier to do those airs. And I think that if you look at the video, for example, from 2007, there's some amazing turns in that video. But there's also a lot of really straight airs. And I think that I would say that you can see the progress in the board development from 2007 till now, in that there are much better turns happening in the fleet compared to 2007. In general, obviously, Cowley was sailing amazing. Polika was sailing amazing in the 2007 video. So I'm not talking about specific instances, but just the fleet on the whole.
Yeah, I just always wonder, like, we get like this massive stock air from a slalom straight line, and it's hard not to go wow, because it has that wow effect, right? I don't want to name names, but I do believe that Antoine Martin is a little bit guilty of that, He's going fucking huge, but a lot of those airs are coming from like mini bottom turns, not the full burned or Brazinho type bottom turn, and I think fair enough, he got penalized for that on the scoring. But it's a fine. I just think it's such a fine line, and I think sometimes for people watching at home, it's really hard to understand why a certain wave got that certain score and not the other one. So
about the airs, for the people at home, I can say a few things that might help to discern how an air should score. So if you look at the position of the board in the lip, basically if the board, if this is your lip and the board is coming at this angle, that's a lot
below,
easier.
Right?
Well, I just mean if you've got it like this and it's coming over the lip, then that's a lot easier to do, and it's going to score a lot less than, I'm trying to think of the best angle how to show this, than coming inside the lip and getting projection from the lip out right? So it's a lot easier to just hit the lip and use it as a kicker, as a ramp, rather than to fit the board inside the curl of the wave, where you're having to come up, fit the board inside the curl of the wave. The board is going upside down and then getting pushed by the power of the wave, by the power of the swell into the air.
Yeah, like that famous Alex Mussolini airs, right? That he came right under it, and it just projected him the fuck out to the flats, you know?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Maciek, where, you know, often in this conversation we've been talking about height, but actually projection is a more important variable. And so what you can look for as well is how far in front of the wave the rider is being pushed. And the more in front of the wave the rider is being pushed by the wave, the more critical they've timed their aerial, the more difficult it is. So if they're jumping and they're landing then on top of the wave, that's a different kind of maneuver than coming inside the lip and getting pushed and projected into the flats of the wave.
Yeah, but again, do you want to land in the flats? Because you're not going to make the wave. If you land in the flats on that first section, the waves, just the train is just going to leave the station, you know, to quote.
You do. I mean, like if you look at a lot of these aerials, you know, Sugi had some, Angulo had some, Bant was doing more turns than airs on that first section, but there were definitely more than a few airs that were under the lip into the flats on the first part of the wave, and that is so much more difficult. There's so much more risk. It's such a different maneuver than hitting the lip with speed and using it as a kicker.
Yeah, but I'm going to say, surely you have to do what you got to do to make the wave, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're trying to do is put the jigsaw, as I say. Huh?
Do you though? Like, if you have two six maneuvers and the wave run out, so be it, you know?
I think it depends on it's very subjective and to what you're actually doing, how big the air is. If you're doing a straightish air, but it's absolutely massive, there's some credit there. But if you've avoided macking it, and because sometimes in air, and I say this to guys on the course because everyone's kind of scared of aerials, but they don't mind hitting a late turn. But a late turn can be so much more dangerous than hitting an aerial. You know, and again, I'm not taking away from aerials. I'm not saying anything like that. But sometimes it's the safer route, because as you hit the lip, if your timing's good, you're going to kind of avoid all the nasty, heavy stuff because you're in the air, and then you land on relatively quite an easy bit, you know, within the realms of it. I'm not saying airs are bad. There you go, Thomas, you know, crashing on that air. There is risk involved 100%. But if you go and turn into something like that, it's much better to do an air and keep yourself clean and then pick your time to do the turn. So you've got to have all the bits. And I think that's what we saw from the guys that were making finals. They were choosing the right bits. And you could see there was definitely guys getting penalized for doing 4 straight pretty much airs on a wave. And I think that was more so their first turn. They didn't quite time right, so they had to air it. Then they had another air, and then they're in the rock section, and you could only get past that rock section pretty much by airing. So they were kind of stuck in this, oh, bollocks, I've got to now do, and they know it. You know, as a rider, you're like, 4 straight airs is not going to get me through a heat.
Which is why I think it's better to do a turn on that first section, because you're going to have to do an air farther down.
Yes.
But just one more comment on the scoring and the different approaches with the aerials. So Antoine Martin, as already mentioned, goes very straight on his airs, which normally scores less. You know, it's a lot easier to do.
Massive.
Well, this is what I want to lead into. So he's, you know, that's a lot easier to do. It's not as difficult as the other things. But what we saw in that semifinal number 2 is that he was going really late behind the section and putting himself in really critical sections for those big airs. And so even though he's going straight, taking that race down the line approach, the way he was doing it made it more impressive, more difficult, and warranted higher scores.
Yeah, I'd agree. Again, it's very hard to say this because it really is dependent on the wave. You know, look at that
Now
thing.
that just played, that's the fucking hardest move, I think. On
Yeah,
the first
that
section
was
you can
really
do.
good. And if he'd made that second turn, even without much else on the wave, that would have been a really high score.
Yeah,
because that was a very impressive aerial.
Yeah, as we play that back again, that's so hard. Like, I think that gets really like lost how hard that is.
see that? I like that.
Yeah, so that's behind the section, into the flats.
And just everything he does is so functional. That hit was sick. And it projects him enough that he makes that section. And it's like,
well, pretty much this wave won him the final.
Yeah, that's the 8.5.
Yeah, that wave won the final.
Yeah, that's a beautiful ride.
You can just see his brain working, or just his body reacting, I should say, to the wave all the way down. You know, you can't pre-plan. It's just moves. This.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. He could have hit that. There was a little section there he could have hit.
Well, he wouldn't have made that. So, you know what I mean?
This is beautiful.
Pretty sick.
Yeah, that's the one bubble right here that he probably thought that the wave's going to be steeper. But then, yeah, the damage was done, I think, by then. Those two hits and just the size of the wave and the flow and everything. Just on point.
But you can see that Antoine Martin's board doesn't really cut back, right? You can see that as he comes up, or maybe it's his ability, I'm not sure, but it's either the ability or the board. He can get up there with the bottom turn, but then it just nothing happens.
It kind of pivots on the fins, right? Doesn't engage rail, doesn't really surf.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it looks like.
But I think what also people don't realize if they're watching is it's so offshore, I'm guessing. You know,
yes.
So to do, like, when you look at how many good riders are there and how good they can sail and how sick I've seen everyone turn, and then you see here, and I think Thorpe mentioned it before, just saying we didn't see many critical turns. And it's because it's so offshore. If you do a critical turn, there's a very good chance you're going to come off, or you're not going to make the next section. So faced with that, when you're getting two set waves, maybe one set wave and one decent one in a heat, you cannot afford to make any mistakes. There was some heats. I think you had one, Graham.
That's why I want to see it more, because it's actually it's actually risky, right? It's actually risky to do a full wraparound cut back, you know, back into the, let's say, and like Ricardo had one, Brasilio had a couple. Ricardo had one in his first heat, which, by the way, I thought he sailed like a professor, you know, and then I was like, Ricardo's on it, you know, that's the year, and then the next day happens and he's just totally out of sync. So
that was very well rewarded as well. That turn, I think he got an 8.
That was an 8,
yeah. No, I thought the judging was pretty good. It was rewarding decent turns, like 100%. I saw, you know, Bernd had that one on the inside, and he got a pretty decent score for that one as well. But it was like a proper vert hit. I mean, turns are definitely getting rewarded.
Can we go back and look at this aerial? Because we went and we saw that air from Traversa, and we saw the air from Bant.
Which one we're looking at?
The one from Antoine Martin that we just saw. You can see it's such a different kind of air, where he's just racing down the line, his weight's back, he's very straight, right?
But that was just to make that section. I mean, that way.
Right, but it's, I think, still a good distinction when we're comparing different kinds of aerials. It's a good, you know, on the other side of the spectrum where we have, you know, the under the lip, bottom turning, behind the section ones from Bant and Thomas that we've seen, and this where it's weight back, sailing straight, jumping off the lip. And yes, there is a functional reason to do it there, where he's trying to clear that section, but it still is a good counter example for those.
I have a question.
Yeah, I think for a pure wave rider like yourself, Graham, that wave had everything you hate about it, right? The straight air and then the flaca on the face.
No, but I tell you what, like what I see from that is, are you judging how well they ride the wave or what they do on the wave? Does that make sense? It's because it's,
Well, isn't it both? Isn't it
yeah,
have to be both?
that's what I'm saying. It is, isn't it? So how much did wave selection come into the scores? I mean, quite heavily, I would guess.
Yes, yeah, as it always does in wave riding events, for better or for worse. Yeah, wave selection is a huge part, because it's double, right? Like one, a bigger wave, more critical wave will get better scores, and two, a better wave just allows more. It's like,
Yeah,
your canvas, instead of being this big, is this big, and so if you can do 4 turns rather than 2 turns, it's going to score more. So
should we penalize big good waves ridden safely? Because I feel like a lot of the guys get a good wave and they're like, okay, just make the wave. Safe turn, stock air, another stock air, and it gets a 6, it gets a 5-point high 5 or a 6, and I get that mindset. You've waited fucking 20 minutes for a set, but we want to see risk, right?
Yeah, I don't think they should be penalized. I think that it's quite difficult, and this is a question that is really difficult to answer. How much wave selection should factor in? I think having a priority system like Brasinho and Ricardo are pushing for over the last couple of days would help that a bit, because then it's less about it's less a wave catching event and more a wave riding event. Because if you're trading priorities, then okay, one person gets the set, then the next person's going to get the set, and so it's less likely that one person gets all the set waves. Just to answer Dom quickly, the judges kind of use a replay. So unlike in surfing where they're able to really dissect the replay, what the judges have, so they're watching it live, and then they have the live stream playing with a delay. So after the waves have been seen in first person, then they can look at the live stream, which is 30-second delayed or whatever it is, and to see again, or maybe to see a wave if they miss something. Because one of the big difficulties with judging here, and it is really difficult, is that the wave is long, and so one guy is riding over here and the other one is starting his ride up here, and you just physically can't watch both at the same time. And so having the live stream on delay like that can help alleviate that problem.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because even watching at home, you're like, man, I need to see that again to appreciate it or to not appreciate it, whichever which way around it is. Yeah, very interesting. And the priority, just because you've got priority, it doesn't mean that wave you're going to get. You know what we're talking about before? We saw it yesterday. Maybe Costa's got priority, but he's too high up. And if you can sneak him under priority and, you're lower down, it still doesn't guarantee you getting the wave. But if there's if there is a bit of indecision whose wave it is, it's like, well, I've got the priority, it's mine. So
yeah, I think
that's kind of interesting.
Protects the heavier guys a little bit, right?
Well, having I was just going to say, having a system of trading priority would make it so that guys don't have to sit so far out and so deep. The reason everyone is so deep and so far up outside is that they're trying to be in that priority position, and in doing so make it really hard for them to catch waves, really hard to see the waves. And there were a few good waves coming in under everyone that didn't go ridden because everyone gets pushed up because they have to fight for priority. And if you had a system of trading priority, people would be sitting more at the peak in a better position to catch the waves. Yeah.
And again, everyone's taking bigger stuff. So the riding is going to suffer in offshore winds. If you've got bigger stuff, like I say, when that apparent wind comes up, you're trying to you've got a bigger board and you've got a bigger sail, you've got all this power, and you're like, oh my God. And you're trying to get the bloody rail in. And it's just, you're on too big a gear, but the bigger guys have to be on bigger gear. Otherwise, they're never going to get any waves underneath the lighter guys, which is already happening even with them on bigger gear. So it is interesting. I think that will be, if we have more competitions in this type of conditions, which I've got to say a massive thanks to Somewhere. They put a lot of money in to make this event happen, you know, which is Starboard essentially. Somewhere Clothing, 10 times climate positive, and all the stuff I remember from the last event in France, which they also supported, you know, Josh. And I've got to say the sailors were the ones, which is the PWA. The PWA is run by the sailors and the brands, but they were pushing for this competition. They don't want to end their careers, you know, sailing Tenerife and just Pozo. Not that there's anything wrong with those venues. Those venues are epic, but they need this event like this in Cape Verde. You know, Bernd Rodiger, for whatever, was disappearing, you know, and look at the talent he's got. He's in Maui. He would have, maybe if these events don't happen, he doesn't get to showcase that. And now this event will have lifted him right up. There's no two ways about it. Yes, we know he's good. He's won the lower classics before. You know, he was in that Kai Lenny's shadow, I think, for a long time. But talented wise, he is up there with easily the best, which we've just seen. So I think that's a super interesting thing to see. And we also saw upsets. It's very rare you see upsets in Pozo because you have 14 minutes. The good guys can jump, whatever the wave. Whereas as you see in a wave riding event, so wave selection is massive. And that already adds this extra bit of, oh my God. And that's why I was watching it all day, because I knew if that guy is the best guy here, it doesn't matter if he's the best guy. If he doesn't get a wave, he ain't doing anything. Whereas in Pozo and 47, you can kind of make a double forward. You can do whatever you want to do if you've got the skills. Whereas in Ponte Preta, for example, watching, you don't get the waves, you ain't getting through.
Yeah, we were texting last night, Prophet and I, like trying to pick some like winners and losers, and I think the biggest winner is just windsurfing. You know, the fans, the tour, the competitors, just the PWA too gets so much slack for, you know, for not having down the line events, but it's because down the line events are in the remote locations. PWA event costs normally like over 200,000 euros or whatever, and it's just super hard, you know. So big winner, like the whole sport basically, you know. And kudos
okay, Maciek. Maciek, you wanted to do this. Let's do it.
Yeah. So that's
no, but let's do it. Let's do it. So just because I haven't put Graham in on this, so Maciek's got this idea of we do winners and losers. So the question is, name one thing that was a winner from this competition. Could be a person, could be whatever. Or Maciek can start us off, and some losers from this competition. So I would say, what's the first winner? Bernd. You know, I think he's obviously won the single. It's not over yet. Double elimination to come. You know, when you saw that interview with it at the end, I'm sure a lot of people bought into the Bernd Rodiger fan club, because he's like, you know, oh man, I just got given these boards. I borrowed a boom. You know, that's kind of got a nice story behind it. I don't know how true that is, because he's definitely a big talent, but he hasn't had the showcase to show his skills. You know, we have seen him at the Aloha Classic, but with COVID over the last couple of years, no one's been doing competitions, and him to turn up, you know, all the big names are here in windsurfing now. You know, Brasinho's here, Traversa, all the, you know, Ricardo, everyone's here, and he's pretty much was standout all the way through the heats till the final, and then busted out that 8.5, which got him the win. So I would say, for one thing, he's definitely a winner here. And maybe his sponsors are, because they're definitely in the limelight.
Just one comment on that before we go on with the winners and losers. I'm not surprised. He's always someone at Hokipa that impresses me. He's probably the person in any down the line contest that I most don't want to get in the draw in a heat. I mean, I think I've beaten, you know, everyone at some point, someplace or another. But Bance is the one that gives me the chills. I don't want to be against him. He's just so good, has so much talent. So I'm really happy for him here and not surprised at all.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a surprise for the guys that know him at all. Like when I did the Cape Verde blast from the past with Alfie the other day, at the end, I mentioned a few riders. I think I mentioned 3. Burnt was one of them as a wild card, because you just know if you've won in the Aloha Classic against all the top boys, I think he's won it twice. You know, maybe the American Tour one or whatever it is, but there's still top boys there. You know, and you see the videos, you know he's got the skills, and he's also got this winner's mindset, and he doesn't mind taking a risk, which I think for the viewer is really refreshing. You kind of seeing him go for tricks, and I like that. You know, you know there's not many people pulling them off, and some of them are not rewarded, but sometimes even if it's not rewarded as high as some people think, that extra half a point, that extra whatever it might be, is the difference between winning and losing. You know, you look at the final, it was close. Like, we all know the results, but if you look at it, I think it's less than a point, isn't it? Yeah. Between the load of them.
0.2. 0.2.
Yeah, but I mean, for the whole 4 of them,
yeah,
one wave would have changed that whole thing. We'd have had and that's the beauty of down the line. One wave in the last couple of minutes or set just blows it all open. And you
and
know,
it's so cool, and it's so cool to see him. Like, it's so cool to see him like even try 360s. Nobody like would ever think it's possible because it's so offshore, you know. But I like, you can see him whipping it and like give a little bit more size, a little bit of more lip, you know. And he's probably gonna make one, you know, and then it's gonna be just sick. I don't know. It's just so good to watch, you know. Like, as much as, you know, he's a specialist, and you can, you know, down versus a person like Brasilio that sails everything so well and whatever. But it's just so good to have him in the event, and so good to see that, you know, because as you say, with the whole Nash debacle and whatever, it didn't really put him in a good light and all that. So yeah, great story, you know, great comeback, great story, great attitude, you know, all this artist. He was like posting how it just being there was, you know, was a dream come true, you know. So sick.
So who are the losers?
My first one is like normal size people. I think we touched on that a lot, you know. It just seemed like you need to be really light and nimble to get waves, to have a small enough board, to, you know, to be able to fit in the wave, and hopefully with bigger. If my Cabo Verde how you say expertise is correct, that by the end of the week you guys should get some bigger conditions. Do you think that opens it up for bigger guys a little bit more?
Depends on, I think, more on the wind than the waves.
But the forecast was really windy for when you guys were actually riding, right? It was like 20 knot forecast, which for Cabo Verde is quite a windy one.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Having more waves, more wind makes it easier. You know, also more sets. Even, you know, with a few exceptions, like Antoine Martin's heats, they seem to have 5 or 6 sets, but most of the heats only had 2 sets or 1 set, which makes it then really difficult. So if you have more sets, also it matters less about weight and being able to catch them.
Yeah. Another winner, and I want you to take me through this, Japan. I just put down Japan because both actually, you know, we didn't see much of Takara Ishii because he went out first round, but Sugi carried that flag, didn't he? How impressed? Did you expect it, Graham? How impressed are you?
Yeah, I'm very impressed, but again, also not surprised. I've seen these riders, Sugi and Ishii, coming up. You know, they've been coming to Maui. I've been going to Japan since I was a teenager, and I've seen a lot of these riders come up. And you know, Japan, what a lot of people in Europe forget, Japan has a huge windsurfing scene. Japan is one of the biggest windsurfing countries in the world, and there's an amazing wave sailing scene. And in Europe, we kind of forget about it because the worlds are somewhat separate, and we don't see a lot of video from Japan. But there's a whole wave sailing world in Japan, and with a deep and rich history as well. For example, the move, the taka, which is a staple in wave riding competition, was invented by a former Japanese pro sailor. And there have always been Japanese pro sailors who have been standouts in the wave lineup. But there was a break for a period of maybe 10 years or 15 years where that wasn't the case. And so it's really great to see this younger Japanese generation coming up. So definitely a win for Japan, but also not a surprise if you've been paying attention.
Yeah, man. I mean, he has been killing it. I think he won the junior competition at the Aloha Classic. Yes. And he's a starboard tack sailor. He's been sailing port tack. I mean, and also you got to remember, like Takara Ishii, who actually didn't make it through. He is also a ripper too. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in the double elimination. I'm quite looking forward to seeing who comes through the double elimination as well.
Yeah, before we go there, you got a loser, Ben? Give us a loser.
The loser, well, yeah, I would say, I think we've already said it, haven't we? The big boys, they it looked like it. Like you look at Costa. I was looking at some video last night. I don't know if it was just he wasn't getting on the waves, because I look back through the heat and it was a light. It was the end of the day. He had some rippers in the heat, but you look at the waves that the other guys were on, and they were good enough. If he'd have been on those waves, I'm sure he could have done some damage, but he literally didn't get on any decent waves. I don't know if he was just out of position or he was out of position because he was a big guy. So I would say that. I would say losers has got to be.
Yeah, well, let's stick to Costa, because I absolutely hated his body language. Like, not hated as if to hate him, but as in like he just looked just like out of sorts. Like he's not in it. You know what I mean? Like he knew even going into that heat that these conditions are not going to favor him, and he's basically in a lost position. I felt that way when I was watching him. Maybe I'm just making it up or whatever. Or so maybe Graham, you can weigh in if you saw Costa's heat and how he's been on the beach and
my
in the warm-ups and stuff.
My feeling is that people treat Philip unfairly, and they say, "Oh, he's not good in these conditions. Oh, he's a jumper. He's not a rider. That is not true. Philip is a very good wave rider. He's good at port tack down the line. He's also good at starboard tack down the line. And what I see here is a failure on the periphery. It looks like his gear is not tuned for this event. It looks like the boards he's on, which this sounds harsh, but I think it's the truth. Looks like they just flatly don't work in these conditions. And so, he's the reigning world champion. He should be able to get boards that work in waves like this. And so, like, my first response is I want to actually approach him and think about coaching him, because I feel like he has the ability and he has the skill. And I'm like, okay, he just needs some of this periphery support. And now it's too late for this event, but I've been doing some coaching through COVID. And I was like, well, that would be really interesting, because I think I could coach him through to doing really well in one of these events. And what we would work on is gear selection hugely, because you can see here that it just doesn't look like it works. And two is, wave tactics. And Philip doesn't like to sail with other people. He grew up sailing in a place without a lot of people around. He got very good. He's got his own secret spot or sailing Vargas. And even when he's on Maui, he doesn't like to sail Hokipa very much. He likes to sail more down the coast where there are fewer people around. But you've got to put in that time in crowded breaks to figure out how to read the waves from farther outside, right? Because it's a very different story when you don't have people competing for the waves. You can sit close to where the waves are breaking. You can see what's going on. It's a lot easier to line up, a lot easier to catch the waves, versus being in a crowded lineup where you're having to pick the waves way out to sea, and you have to be able to read the ocean and figure out what it's doing. And I think that is a skill that Philip needs to work on. And so it's not the actual riding that he needs to work on so much as gear. I think gear is number one. And, you know, his gear just looks like it doesn't work. And two is that sailing or surfing in a more competitive environment where he's farther out, catching waves farther out to sea, dealing with priority issues in a lineup. You know, at Hokipa, for example, where we sail a lot, it is incredibly competitive to get waves. It's very difficult. You're going out to Japan to catch waves. And I think, you know, the average person that goes and sails out there, they can sail for 3 hours without catching a single wave because it is so competitive with the priority system. And that's the work that Philip needs to do. And it's a lot more than just going outside. It means you have to be able to read the ocean that much farther outside. You have to know, okay, the peak of the wave is down there, so I have to set up here because it takes me that far to go down the line to catch it, and so on and so on. So I think Philip needs these periphery aspects developed, but his core ability, his core skill is there. So
I don't think there's any doubt in his core skill. I just felt a bit, maybe just his weight, he wasn't able to get on the set waves. But I'm looking at this. This is the heat right now. He did have Bant in his heat. I think he had Sugi as well, who were both pretty light, but that looks quite windy, you know, relatively. If he'd have been on one of these waves, but he wasn't.
But I think I'm going to push back against you a little bit, Ben, because I think there is a lot of doubt. I see all these comments on Instagram and Facebook of people saying, "Oh, Philip's a jumper. Philip's not a surfer. Philip, blah blah blah." And I don't think that's true. I think he does have the surfing skills. I've seen him at Hokipa. I've seen him the videos from Australia. I know that he can do it, and I think that a lot of the windsurfing world seems to doubt that. And I'd love to see him prove them wrong.
I think
from whenever I love this analysis, Graham. I absolutely love the analysis because I was thinking and I was feeling for him, like, where does this come from? Because it's been years, right? It's been ever since the Hokipa contest came back and people doubting and people, like you say, like putting him down. And I don't know if he's immune. I don't know Philip well. I don't know if anybody does actually, but it's like, I wonder if he's immune to that, if he wants to prove, if he gets frustrated, if he's actually trying to get down the line boards. For me, when I watch his social media and stuff, it looks like he wants to ride the same gear everywhere. And as much as it's kind of a noble approach in terms of, okay, I'm going to know my gear really well and whatever, it's been proven that it doesn't work. I think as a fan, I'm not nowhere near the level, absolutely. And then you know the ability to also like you say just skizzle through heats with bad stuff. Philip, I think, is from what I understand, is a perfectionist. He loves great moves. He only posts stuff that are fucking massive, clean. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but this is what I feel like from the outside, you know, and I absolutely love your analysis there.
I think looking from the outside, he always comes across to me as a windsurfer. Like he likes wind. You know, if he's got wind, he is outstanding. Wherever it's down the line, jumping, whatever. If he's got wind, he is always a friggin' challenger like crazy. And I don't know, like I said, in that heat, I never saw him on a good wave. So it wasn't that he got a good wave and I went, oh man, his board doesn't look good, or, you know, oh, he's rode that badly. I didn't see him on a wave. I don't think he got a wave of any note. That's why I was saying the priority for the big guys, maybe that is it, because you can't tell watching. Maybe he just couldn't get in position with these young lighter guys ripping around him. But I would have loved just to see him. I didn't see him on one wave. Like I looked through the heats, as far as I could see, I didn't see him on a decent setup at all, not one. So it's like, it's really difficult to judge someone when at the end of the day, you can see it's pretty light.
It is, but
that heat, Byrne got some freaking sick waves. Sugi got some sick waves, and they don't look underpowered. They look like it's offshore, but you've got to be on the wave to create. I don't know. That's how.
But you've got to have big gear that works in these conditions, and you need to be good at choosing waves in these conditions. You know, and I think it really comes down to those fundamental skills. And for example, about the gear, you know, when I see Koster at Hokipa, sometimes I'm surprised how small the gear is that he's riding. You know, he doesn't like to go bigger than 5'2". His boards are not that big compared to his weight. And so, you know, I think it really takes working on that gear. You know, in the Canaries, that's not needed. But, you know, if you want to get good in these conditions, it takes time to develop the boards and the sails, and not just develop the gear, because maybe the gear exists also with his sponsors already, but to put in the time so that you're used to it and so that you're comfortable with it. You know, like I wasn't comfortable on a 5.5 until I realized that I needed to be for competing. And now I love sailing on my 5.5. It just takes putting in the time, putting in the work.
Okay, interesting comment from Booge, which was interesting because I watched the whole live stream, and it, to me, when I was watching Booge ride, I thought his board looked quite big for him. But interestingly, he said it's probably because he's lost a bit of power in his legs because he hasn't been training that much, which is another thing, isn't it? You've got to be able to, when you've got a bigger board than you used to riding, which you need at Punta Preta because you need some volume, the weather that's relative to how big you are, it doesn't really matter, it's just bigger. You've got to be able to push that board under the water. Otherwise, it's going to push back. Like the bigger the board, the more pushback you get. So if you're pushing super hard and you get a bit of chop, like Cape Town is a good example. Like riding a big board in Cape Town is hard work. I spent a lot of guys on the coaching clinic. You know, a couple of them are like 60 odd kilos and got 80-liter boards. And it's like when you push that thing in choppy water, it wants to push back. You can get away with it when it's flat, like I guess in Punta Preta, but you've got to have the leg strength and the pressure, which I think is quite an interesting point. But yeah, to me, it looked like Booge had to sail a little bit more safe, but he was picking off great waves, doing sick airs, throwbacks, and still turning, but maybe not pushing as hard as he usually would have. And I think, me personally watching, it helped him get through more heats. Just an observation. Whether it's right or not, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Bujma, winner.
Winner.
You got
winner.
I got one more winner. I got one more winner, and it's the Euros, as the Maui boys like to refer to, which I was really impressed. Even though they didn't pass their heats or passed one heat, I was really impressed with Julian Salmon, with Marino Gill, with Jules Denel, which obviously is a seasoned competitor, so I don't think we talk about him much, but Baptiste Clorec, Liam Dunkerbeck, you know, guys that you wouldn't necessarily refer to as down the line wave riders, or you didn't see much of them riding down the line, you know, or starboard tack for that matter, you know, and they go out and they rip. And I think the narrative is changing a lot, you know, on people that, you know, that are sailing mainly inside onshore. Maybe that's due to gear as well. The gear got a lot better. Yeah, I just felt like the Euros stepped it up, you know, a lot. And there's almost nobody that you know, previously you would see somebody in the Aloha Classic or maybe in this Cabo Verde event. You're like, yeah, he's good in Ozo or Tenerife or whatever, but he doesn't really fit in this contest, right? I didn't get that feeling at all. And I was there like glued to my screen on the first round to see all the guys that I've seen ripping.
Look at the final, though.
Okay. Not, you know, Rome hasn't been built in a day, you know, but
can I just show you something? just that might illustrate not your point at all, because I'm just having a quick look. Let me just find it. Okay.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I just, there is a, you would just think that the guys would be totally off the pace, I think a lot of people thought that. And like Baptiste, correct, he got the highest score of the first round, So yeah, I don't know. Jules Denel was like this close from getting through to the to where? To the
I've got a few losers. Just to throw.
We just got one. Jules is masked.
Yeah. I was gonna say the gear. There's been a lot of gear broken, a lot of masks, a lot of boards. I don't know anyone who hasn't broken at least something.
Yeah.
That looks so painful. And another loser is the sea urchins. We think of how annoying it is that we've got them all on our feet, but think of it from their perspective. We're leaving with parts of their body lodged in ours.
I should find that video from Surf's Up right now. Anyone know that? Gone, broken, gone. Oh, I should find that clip. That's a beauty.
Hey, I got one quick winner, and I don't think anybody will disagree. Josh Angulo's cardio program. That's a definite winner.
I've got another winner that's not really because of the event, but it's just a winner in general, which is Cabo Verde. I am so impressed. It's been a few years since I've been here. I think the last time I was here was 2017 or 16. And Santa Maria has really transformed in the time since then. They've redone totally new construction in the downtown of Santa Maria, created a pedestrian-only area. It's beautiful. It's vibrant. There's a lot of nice restaurants. It feels completely different. Josh, I'm staying in the hotel that Josh built. It's this great modern hotel. Josh's center is looking great. I'm really impressed. This was a place, maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing my kids. And now I'd really like to come back with them here. It's a great place.
It's interesting, actually, because the PWA, it is a massive advert if you want to bring windsurfers to your place. Because I remember when Island, came on the PWA scene, it was like, gee, everyone went, oh my God. And then it did get mega busy in Ireland for a few years. It's like Cape Verde. Is that now going to relaunch it again? Because it kind of weirdly, not forgotten, that's probably the wrong word, but it's definitely shifted down the pecking order, and stuff like this definitely puts it back up there again. Like I'm looking at it going, oh, it's not that far from Portugal. It's got easy flight from Lisbon, maybe on a forecast.
Well, it's Adrian as well is asking if there are other good spots, and there are a lot of good spots, some hardcore spots, some spots that are much more difficult than Punta Preta, the Alibaba, the Corajules, but there are also
Little Hoquipa is really user friendly, right? Little Hoquipa or even
right in front of the Angulo Center. There are a lot of good spots on the island. You can talk to. You can reach out to the Angulo Center or some of the other centers here about locations. I'm not an expert in them, but I know that you get wave sailing just right in front of the beach here in Santa Maria. There are other places. Noah's in the chat. He can let us know. So I think it's a really great place to visit.
Yeah. Okay. Double elimination coming up. There looks like there is a forecast. What are you boys watching forward to? Who's gonna be the comeback king? I mean, we got Victor in round 1, we got Campello in round 2, we got Ezzy.
I'm not sure. I'm looking to come back through. I was quite disappointed to lose as early as I did. I had an issue with my gear. And so I'm quite fired up to improve on my 9th place finish.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I gotta say, like the single elimination, the top of the draw was absolutely stacked, and I think Ricardo kind of fell victim to that. Maybe, you know, more so. Okay, his sailing wasn't great, but then if you look at that heat on paper, like you had Juban, Angulo, Traversa, and Campello in the second round heat. We were having a laugh here in Tenerife, like, you know, the seating system doesn't really like Ricardo, does it? You know, so.
And the next heat, like my heat, the next one was me, Brow, Morgan, and Swift, and then the semifinal after that was insane. It had Angulo, Traversa, Brown, and Morgan. If you look at that heat, there are 6 Wave World titles. Over everyone in that heat has won multiple World Cups in down the line conditions. Maybe Traversas aren't in down the line conditions, but anyway, the point is like there's a huge amount of accolade in that heat, and then you know the next semifinal heat, and taking nothing away from those guys because they are incredible sailors, but there are far fewer results in that second semifinal heat, which just means there's less experience, there's less maybe on the tactics side. You know, I don't want to take anything away from their ability because, you know, Bant is in that heat, Antoine Martin, Sugi, and those guys are sailing really, really well. But there definitely is, just matter of fact, fewer accolades in that.
Okay, who's coming back through? Who's coming back through to at least get to Angulo and Bouge and Sugi in a row?
So Fernandez is going to be fired up. Fernandez is going to be very fired up.
From the top, you'd kind of have to think Juban, maybe, looking at that. Yep. I reckon Ishi's got a chance, correct? Yeah, but I would go Juban. I'm going to just stick it out there. Next one, I'm going to have to say Ezzy. Maybe because you're there, but no, for sure. I think that looks like Juban Ezzy. That would be my call. The next one gets a bit more tricky. I think Fernandez is going to be pretty upset, but then Swift is.
Yeah, Swift. I feel like Jake Shadowy can have like I don't know. I feel like he can have a fucking 17-point heat, or he can have a 7-point heat. You know what I mean? So I'm like,
yeah.
I just like
I think
Victor,
Victor's gonna have to do something. He's come back in the double before, like all the way from the beginning. But again, it's not going to be easy because it's a 4-man heat in the next one, and then you've got what? Costa Rican, Salmon, Denel, Campello. You're going to say Campello should get.
Ricardo will be fired up. Fernandez. I think Fernandez is the one that I think has the most fire under him to improve this position, because even though he's thought of as, you know, a canary sailor in some ways, or an onshore sailor, in his heart, he is, I mean, he likes everything, but especially down the line sailing. He comes to Cabo Verde on forecasts. He likes to sail here. This is one of his favorite spots in the world. He was one of the riders pushing to have this event. You know, for the people that don't know, behind the scenes, there was a big push from the riders just to make this event possible. So in order to make this event possible, we had to cut a lot of our standards to allow this event to happen. And that was important to us. And Victor was one of the key pivotal voices in making that happen, because it's good for the sport. And these are conditions that he really enjoys. So
on top of that, he looks good. Like on the warm-ups, the gear looks good. He posted something on a 100-meter and a 5.5. He has everything. He's set up with boards. I mean, I've seen him around Europe driving a van with like 15 boards in it. You know, he's on it. You know, so I think he just needs to brush it off as you know, whatever has happened, and now the contest really starts for him.
Yeah. Okay, boys. I think we've summed it up enough. I'm going to try and get some windsurfing in over here in Cape Town. It doesn't look good though. I've got to be honest. The worst season ever. Had COVID again.
Oh no!
Get a foil, man. I'm picking days to have a rest.
Well, maybe I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to do the whole race foil thing, but not at the moment. I'm still in wave mode zone. I've still not got that out of my system yet. And watching Cape Verde has definitely not helped. I was like, oh my God, I want to go. Although there's a good forecast for when I get back in Portugal, I think, at the secret spot. So let's see. Might get the old Cape Verde to myself. All right, boys.
Hey, good luck, Freddy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck
Thanks for having me.
It looks exciting. I'm excited. Graham, just do your take on what's the feeling on the beach there. When's it looking like it's on? There must be.
I think on the weekend. I think Saturday we're looking to see the swell start to come in, and there's a bit of talk whether the swell will come in at Punta Preta. It's a very north swell, and generally you need northwest swell. But if it's big enough, it should still come in. What can we expect with a more north swell than a west swell? We can expect slightly shorter wave. That first section still having a lot of weight to it, but then petering out. Something similar to what we saw in the Expression session in 2009, which is it's still a great wave.
Yeah.
Well, any chance you guys move? Any chance you guys move to another spot?
There is a small possibility that we move if the swell doesn't come into Punta Preta on Saturday. But it is small. The logistics of moving are very difficult. I think that if it comes down to finishing the contest, if we have to move to finish the contest, I think we will. But if there's any way to finish at Punta Preta, we will, because otherwise there's no power, there's no internet, makes it very difficult. It means that they'd be judging on paper rather than doing the live judging. It means that there probably would be no live stream, and so a lot of the periphery around the event would suffer.
Okay, well, let's hope it's Punta Preta then.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get my weekend booked in. All right, guys. Good luck. We'll leave you to go do your beach cleanup, because I think that's where you're off to now.
Yep, that starts in about 20 minutes.
Okay, so just a massive thanks again to Somewhere for, just sounds so weird that, to Somewhere for sponsoring the event, the riders for kind of lowering the standards and making this event happen. And obviously Josh Angulo over there in Cape Verde. I don't think it's been off the map, but it's definitely made it a little bit bigger again for a few people. I think it's definitely popped up again in my mind. I'm like, oh yes, so maybe it's going to happen. All right, see you on the next one. Hopefully we do another one of these at the end with just epic conditions to review.
That's good.
So see you then.
All righty.